It's Solving Your Driver Problem, where we bring guests who have proven strategies that just plain work for driver recruiting, compliance, training, and retention. Today, I have Steve Bryan, CEO of Bluewire. Bluewire, my definition, not theirs, is giving motor carriers tools to play offense against plaintiff attorneys who paint a false narrative. Steve, welcome to the program. How you doing?
Thank you, Scott. Thank you. Glad to be here. Glad to be here. Glad to see you.
Well, let's start with this. Many people know you from probably in trucking. They know you from the Vigilo days. They probably saw you take a tour at Samba. Why are you back at it, man? Why did you start Bluewire? What's the big?
Such a great question, Scott. I think my wife keeps asking me that same question. Well, look, not to go deep into the background, but I was with Samba for 3.5 years, and I was loving it. I mean, things were tracking well, and I was splitting my time between Portland, where I live, and Denver, and felt like I was helping. And then COVID, of course, hit, and all of our lives changed, including my no longer I had the opportunity to go to Denver. So started feeling like maybe that was speaking to me, and it was time to do something else. I wasn't sure what that something else would be, but of course, all of us in the industry have been watching this so-called nuclear verdict problem rise over the last, nearly 10 years. And in fact, that I kind of hearken back to the ATA's annual conference. It was in 2019, fall of 2019. It was in San Diego that year. And I remember coming away from that somewhat inspired. Chris Spear, ATA CEO, gave a kind of a general session near the end of the conference. And as Chris is prone to do, he got up there and he was banging the podium and getting all fired up and said, this coming year is the year we fight back against these reptile lawyers and their runaway nuclear verdicts. Well, of course, Chris and none of us knew at the time COVID was about to enter our vocabulary. So I think 2020 ended up maybe not being that year. But that put it into my head, and I started thinking, in fact, I called Chris and I said, Chris, what would you think if I proposed to put together a data platform, a new service, something that doesn't exist? It's not safety, it's not risk, it's not compliance, it's not maintenance, it's not insurance, it's not onboarding, it's all those things. Specifically tuned to help the industry resist this reptile theory and the resulting verdicts. And he seemed to like the idea, so I started talking it up. One thing led to another. Then I left Samba in August of 2020. And by then, myself and now 3 other founding partners, there's 4 of us that are partners in Bluewire, we all decided this was something we wanted to take on. Somewhat, interestingly, coincidentally, all 4 of us were about the same stage in our careers. I was looking at maybe retirement being an alternative. My other 3 partners were all in our mid-60s, still youngsters. And all of us were kind of pondering whether we had reached a point where retirement was maybe where we were headed. And all of us decided this is a problem that is so important in an industry that we have served and loved so much. Let's take a shot at it. So that's how really the Bluewire was born, because there are 4 of us who have been passionate about the trucking industry for years and decades in some cases, and decided we would see if we could help.
So that's a solid why. We're subscribers to Simon Sinek over here. So we like the why, we like the how, the what. So how do you go about solving this big, hairy, and it's runaway. I like runaway verdicts as well, because there's something in between, that $50,000 collision and 10 million, right? And so, right. But it should have stopped at 10. Talk to me about that. How do you go about solving this problem for carriers?
You're exactly right, Scott. The term nuclear verdict, I've never been I don't love it. I think we could have maybe come up with a better label for it, because yes, there are some that would be considered, I guess, nuclear, so destructive that they wipe things out and can never be recovered, and that type of thing. But if you talk to almost anybody in the industry, it's the smaller ones, the hand grenade verdicts that were $50,000 that are now $250,000 that never reached the level of the definition of nuclear. But you add those up, death by 1,000 cuts, and I think those are maybe more troubling to people than the still very rare actual nuclear case. But it's the same. So the how is the same answer, whether it's keep your $250,000 case down to 50 or your 20 million down to 1 million, whatever it is, it's exactly the same approach. So a lot of research went into what we do, and it wasn't all just ours. We did a lot, but we also looked at people like ATRI, American Transportation Research Institute. They did some really interesting work studying this problem that same summer of 2020. And we learned a lot from that. We did a lot of our own research. One of my partners, Doug Marcello, is a 30-year practicing defense attorney. He knows a thing or two about this. And then there's other groups. There's another one, ATRA, American Tort Reform Association, that has done a lot of work on these so-called judicial hellholes, and they have a lot of insight into the where, maybe not the how, but the where of this, and that becomes really important. We learned that even at Vigilo, where you operate matters big time in things even like CSA scores. We saw a lot of that impact. So, and it matters here too, where your lanes are, where you're domiciled, et cetera, matters big time. So the how is we've identified a data set, a set of data elements, KPIs, think of them that way. Unlike some data companies that are doing big integrations with your back-end platforms and consuming huge terabytes of data and processing it and trying to do predictive analytics on it, that's not what we're doing. We have, through our research, identified about 250 data elements, KPIs, crash rate. There's an example. Certain hours of service violations, unassigned time, personal conveyance. We look at these things because they are what we call the attack vectors. They are the things the trial lawyers will find. And most of this is public data. They can find it with or without your help. They go and they're getting really good at it. We live in an age, in and out of the trucking industry, we are inundated with data. And an awful lot of it is available to people who are knowledgeable and know how to gather that data. So our opponents in this, these trial lawyers, are becoming some of the best data scientists that I've seen. They really understand the trucking industry data. They teach it to themselves. There's seminars you can go to and learn how to peruse an ELD platform looking for certain kinds of violations. They're really smart about this. They know where to go look. So our how is we have mirrored what they do. We know their game plan. We have their playbook. It's called The Reptile. That's their book. We've read it. We know it page by page. And we have built a platform that will essentially put you, the motor carrier, in the position to know ahead of time what they're looking for. I draw a lot of parallels, Scott. Many of us who work in technology are familiar with all the stuff that goes on in cybersecurity, right? Hackers and hackers have a similar, it's where we actually, we call these attack vectors. That's where that language comes from. An attack vector is an email attachment or malware, or a phishing link, something like that. It's a strategy to break through the security systems of a company and get into personal information, credit card numbers, et cetera. And you can hire a white hat hacker, someone who will, ahead of that, before the bad guys show up, they will penetrate your systems, show you where you're weak, and say, you got to patch this up, you got to clean that up, have a better firewall, do this, do that, do the other thing. And then when the bad guys come, you're a hard target. That's exactly what Bluewire is doing. Our white hat here, what you see behind me on the wall, is our little trademark representing we are the white hats to the black hat trial lawyers. So we are looking at those 250 data elements, the same ones they will look at, and telling you ahead of the crash, be prepared. Because if something bad happens and this vulnerability exists at your company, they're going to find it. Absolutely no question. Does that make sense? That's the how.
I dig it. And hopefully you're okay with me taking a look to say you're playing offense, because I think that's what it is forever. It's been, let's just show up to court and we're just going to field whatever's coming our way. And this is the first time that I'm seeing the ball being shifted, right? No, we're going on the attack. And I like the white hat analogy. I think it's the right one. And I want to thank, we did a presentation with Bob a couple of weeks ago, and your whole series about beyond compliance. What do you mean by beyond compliance, and how do carriers fall into that compliance only trap?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, we see that a lot. You know, we actually have we've developed a kind of a graphic we use sometimes in our presentations that shows a person from a motor carrier. Maybe it represents somebody in the safety department, and they're up on a ball and they're juggling all this stuff in the air, and they're juggling CSA and ELD and pre-employment screening and all the MVRs, all the things they have to do. It's incredible, and companies do a really good job at it. But when you are so focused on that juggling of the day-to-day task, the compliance that you have to do, you sometimes, many times, you ignore the things you're doing as a company that, guess what, you don't actually have to do. You don't have to install cameras in your trucks, but a lot of people do. There's lots of advanced safety systems you can order, you can spec on your new trucks. They cost money. You don't have to do them, but people do. So the concept of beyond compliance goes back quite a ways. It was actually a concept presented by FMCSA back in around 2014. And their concept was that they envisioned perhaps a program where companies that went into this beyond compliance area, they invested in technology and software and services that the regs didn't require them to do. The FMCSA was thinking we would give you credit somehow. In that case, credit against CSA scores. It was very specifically a CSA program. Well, they never rolled it out. They never could quite get it to a level that was accepted, I think, either internally or even by the industry. But we like the concept of not crediting CSA scores. That's not what we're doing. What we're doing is we're adding to your offensive toolkit, so that when you go on the offense and you control your narrative, you start with, well, let me tell you about the millions of dollars we spend on cameras, on advanced driver assist systems, on driver training, on deeper background checks, et cetera, PSP reports, all these things. But guess what? We don't have to do. We do them because we actually really care. That's our culture. And that goes a long ways towards defusing this negative narrative from the black hats that try to paint this picture of what a terrible corporate evil operator you are.
Steve, do you think that stuff has in a good way become cameras, PSP, all that stuff you just rattled off has become commonplace, that in this industry that we forget that stuff, hey, look at all of us advancing, and then if you're in court, how the heck does somebody in a jury who's never been a part of this industry know that? Do we forget to brag?
That's it, boy, I tell you, Scott, you said it perfectly. We forget to brag. I love that. That's exactly right. We forget because we're so busy up on that ball juggling all the day to day. We forget to tell everybody, hey, we're inventing this stuff. ATA, I saw a report recently. They say that this industry now spends in excess of $10 billion a year on safety technology. Almost all of that is not required. Now the ELDs are now and things like that, but there's a tremendous interest in adoption of and investment in these technology platforms that nobody says you have to do. This industry cares very deeply about safety, and we don't brag about it. That's what our Beyond Compliance program is there for. Brag may not be quite the right word. To document and to showcase when the inevitable happens, the bad crash, you can showcase, yes, we had a crash. Maybe we were even at fault to some degree in this case, but this isn't the way we operate. This is out of the norm for us, and let us explain to you everything we do to try and avoid these circumstances. So that'll be on compliance for us.
We really dig the Beyond Compliance program. One of my business partners, Mark Gardner, wrote a white paper before I was born called The Perversion of Safety. And the point was compliance is not safety. Safety is not compliance. But to your point, I have to do this or I'm going to get in trouble. So I do it. And so really that's been our philosophy. Well, how can some of that compliance stuff is well-intentioned, but it's a rule. And that's the only tool that the government has, right? They have a hammer and they go around doing this.
Right.
And so how can we automate that so we can focus on the good stuff, and so we can then showcase all the good stuff we're doing, right? And that's why we want to become part of the allies, right? I think it's a good peanut butter and jelly.
Yeah, it is great.
So let's I'm curious, you like to roll around in data. Ever since I met you, that's been a thing you like to do. You mentioned there's about 250 vectors that plaintiff attorneys are poking at. Is there a most common one or couple that you see?
Oh, God. Yeah, this is actually something that ATRI did a great job of. In the research they did, they looked at something like over 600 cases in these nuclear cases, right? And I don't have it up in front of me, but they published a top 10 list. They have a top 10, basically a top 10 attack vectors. They don't call them that. They call them the top 10 issues where, when present in a case, the plaintiff wins an extraordinarily high percent of the time. So there are things like hours of service. I mean, the things that are so common to us, Scott, we see them all the time, right? It's hours of service. Now, in this case, when ATRI was looking at it, they were still calling some of the logbooks. We're a little bit away from that for the most part. But so hours of service violations is one. I mean, think about it. Think of the emotion. It's all about stirring up emotion. What they want to find. So the reptile book itself says, this is their training guide to how to sue us. They will say you have to find these, what they call systemic violations, systemic issues that are not being dealt with at the company. So it's not that you find 1 hour of service violations. That's not going to do it. You have to find a pattern of them that are not remedied. So hours of service, DQ files is a big one. So, if you don't keep good DQ driver qualification files, they'll eat you alive on that one. Distracted driving, cell phone texting. What's your policy? Do you enforce your policy? How do you enforce your policy? Those types of things. The one they look for is they have great success when it is a rear end crash. The truck runs into another vehicle. Always they're going to find at least one of speed, distraction, or fatigue. Every single one of those rear end crashes has one of that. And that's red meat for them. That's the payday for them right there, because those are leading to where they believe they can mine your company's data and find these systemic failures, right? So, and then of course, the big one, the big bucket that they just love it when they can roll around. You mentioned rolling around in data. They love to roll around in the onboarding process, the driver hiring process. They can find lots of evidence of hiring the wrong people, not doing the proper vetting of them, either background checks or pre-employment or whatever the case may be. It is a fruitful place for them to roll around and be able to paint this systemic failures picture about your company.
And that goes back to the desperation of empty seats. And, we watch it time and time where you wake up, you kind of chisel away a standard at a time. And it's a little bit like the frog that boils and they wake up. And, 2 years later, it's not the same company that it was, right?
No, that's a great point. And look, we all know that. I mean, all of us are business people, right? We know how urgent it is to put drivers into trucks. But that pressure from a business perspective doesn't fly in front of a jury. They don't care. That just isn't an argument. So while there may be a lot of pressure internally to cut corners or to maybe relax standards or something in certain times and during certain periods, very dangerous. Because, look at you have a crash today. That may not be in court for 2 years. So it's really hard to go back. Well, 2 years ago, it was sure a tough industry and we had to relax our standards to get good drivers. Jury's like, they're already figuring numbers in their head,
Yeah, this is how many zeros am I going to add now?
Exactly.
Yes. And I will say, I'm going to be a proud papa for our team and our clients, that even in this market, as crazy as it was in the last 2 years and struggle to find people, right? It's not easy, but you can do it, right? Our magical secret formula that's not that magical is pitch, placement, and process. You do those things right, you smooth out all the kinks, you work fast, you answer the phones, and you create purple cow marketing. You can find them out there if you're truly a great company, which everybody listening here obviously is. I think it's a good dovetail, Steve. We got to have something to market. You have to be a great company. And most of the people that we work with are good companies, focused on being great companies, or great companies focused on being excellent companies. And when they see these headlines, I see some eye rolls of saying, yeah, but did you see who got tagged, right? Come on, of course they got tagged. Like they don't treat drivers right. They cut corners. That's not me. I do things right over here. What do you say to those carriers?
Well, I'm tempted to just start reeling off the names of some excellent motor carriers who have been the victims of nuclear verdicts, but I'll avoid doing that. We all know their names, but pretend you just heard me reel off the top 10, with nuclear verdicts. They would be excellent companies in many cases. So this is not the realm of all the bad operators. In fact, it's very much the opposite. Put yourself into the seat of a trial attorney for a minute. They're in it to make money. Now they talk about serving in the public defense, blah, 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 and they'll probably write blogs from their private jet while they're flying around to their second beach house and tell us all how they're great. They're serving society and this is advancing safety. I don't buy that for 1 millisecond. But when they look at the motor carrier, they're looking for, again, can I find systemic failures? What's part two? Money. Where am I going to find the money? And they're going to look at the big brands. That's where the money is. That's where the deep pockets is. Look at the case. The name of the trucking company escapes me, but this was our famous case. It was almost a year ago now, September last year, when we had our first billion-dollar verdict. Right? It was a very small motor carrier, a couple of trucks down in Florida. Jury came back, ruled a $1.2 billion verdict against two different trucking companies. They'd pay it. They'd get any money. They might have gotten the minimum insurance. Maybe somebody got part of 750 grand. Of course, the trial lawyer got their 30 or 40% first, by the way, before anybody else got anything. But the point is, they're going to look for the deep pockets. Who can pay the $1 billion? It's not the little mom and pop. It's not maybe that operator that's not running by the rules, and we all know some are out there. That's not where the trial lawyers are looking. They're looking for the companies that can pay those kinds of dollars. That's where they're going to go. So I think it's a very dangerous fallacy to believe that because you believe you're a good operator or you're a big company or they're not coming after us, you're exactly who they're going to come after. You have the money.
Right. I think it's a good summary that those that are running hot are not the ones that have the pockets, because you can't build a sustainable business on that model anymore.
That's right.
So, all right, Steve, I do things right. I care about my drivers. Where do I start? All right, I heard you. I'm aware. I thought I was cool. I'm not. What's the most important thing I should do?
Yeah, find your vulnerabilities. You got to do, it's the same thing. It's the same advice I would give to somebody that said, hey, we've got this big new system we've set up online. It's an e-commerce site. How do I make sure people don't hack it? Well, hire a white hat hacker. Go out and have somebody work on your behalf to test you and make sure you have your hardest possible shell on before the bad thing happens. I would give it exactly the same advice. And that's where you come in. That's where we come in. And many others. We have over 60 partners now that are teamed up with us to try and fight this battle. Start with us and just, take a look. See how you look through the lens of Bluewire and its partners. Have a look and see. Because if you're not looking, I talk to people all the time. They'll say, well, Steve, we have the best CSA scores. We have a great safety department. We have low driver turnover. All of our metrics are fantastic. We don't need you. And I just remind them, I'll ask them, tell me the top 10 attack vectors that the trial lawyers use. And nobody knows. This is new language. People don't think that way, but the trial lawyers do. They know exactly what they're looking for. So I would say don't be led into the belief that you're better than you are because of measurements you're using that are largely driven from FMCSA. You have a new opponent, enemy. You have a new enemy in this, and that's the trial lawyers. And they're not looking at you through the same lens that FMCSA is. So you have to look at yourself through that same new lens, or you're going to miss what it is they're looking for.
There it is. And that's beyond compliance. Steve, if I'm interested, best place to go, bluewire.ai/get involved.
If you just hit bluewire.ai, we have up at the top menu, there's a get involved menu option. If you can come and learn, if you want to be looking to becoming a motor carrier customer, if you're an insurance provider, we're working with a lot of insurance agencies and brokerages and underwriters to try and get Bluewire out there as a standard to vet these carriers, find the ones that need help. So motor carriers, allies such as yourself, customers, even investors in Bluewire can all find information on that one link, the get involved link.
Well, and likewise on our site on avatarfleet.com/resources, there's ebooks, presentations, checklists, templates, guides, whatever Steve and the White Hat gang find. If they find a vulnerability, start there. There's free stuff that you can use, download, and at least get the party started, go in the right direction to start to build what we call the fortress against these bogus lawsuits. Steve, I'll lead you out there with one last question that I asked everybody. That's a personal question. What accomplishment are you most proud of and why in your career? Actually, I don't care if it's your career. It could be your life.
Oh my gosh. In my whole life. Well, it'd have to be my family.
Yeah. All right, career.
Oh, I was about to start diving in and talking about my 4 grandsons and how excited I am about, they all need to get up so they can all walk at least. They're all babies, and come on, you guys, let's go. We got camping and fishing and hunting to do. Let's get busy. But career-wise, I would say, I've done a lot of my career goes back. I started my first software company in 1989 when the software was still stacked up on floppy disks. But I would say the work I did at Vigilo, I think the work we're doing at Bluewire is important, but if you look back and, if I was to put a gold star on something that I have done in the past, I think Vigilo and serving the trucking industry has probably been my proudest achievement.
But second to grandfather.
Second to grandfather. Yeah.
It's cool. I got a 2-month-old at home and I'm watching grandparents ooh and ah over it. It's a pretty cool thing to watch. Wondering who they were, because those people didn't raise me.
That's right. Yeah, I think my wife and I are probably in the same boat. We're probably a lot more relaxed with the grandkids than we were with our own kids, but that's the way it works.
It's the right thing to do. Well, Steve, thank you for joining us. Steve Bryan, everyone, CEO of Bluewire, another great tool, ally of ours on helping you fill empty seats, defend that bogus lawsuit, and bring them home safely. It's all tied together. Steve, thank you for the work you're doing out there, and thank you for joining the podcast.
All right. Thank you, Scott. Really appreciate it.
All right. See you, brother.
Take care.